Rattlesnakes are almost always portrayed as vicious, bloodthirsty killers in popular media. Their very existence strikes fear in the hearts of an unfortunate majority of people. Some polls even report approximately 51% of Americans claim to have a fear of snakes. This fear has been around for a very long time, and this ignorance and demonization has led to particularly cruel persecution and wholesale slaughter of rattlesnakes. But what if I told you that these animals are grossly misunderstood? In fact, rattlesnakes are far more than the bloodthirsty killers we see in movies. They display fascinating behaviors, they nurture their young, and they have rich, complex social lives. We're only beginning to scratch the surface of our understanding of this complexity, but scientists like Chelsea Martin are working to fill in the gaps in our understanding and shed more light on these incredible animals.
My name is Chelsea Martin, and I am a PhD candidate at Loma Linda University. I work in Bill Hayes' lab at Loma Linda University, and I study rattlesnake behavior. I study their social behavior and their stress and personality and how the habitats that they come from influence their personality traits.
How do the habitats influence their personality traits?
So I've been working on this project for the last 2 years, since the summer of 2023, so this is my third summer. With the collaboration of a number of rattlesnake removers, we've been collecting snakes from across Southern California, and we're collecting them from a lot of different types of habitats, and then again, we're bringing them into the lab and doing personality trials, and then we're releasing them. And it's, like I said, it's all really preliminary because each individual has to be tested twice because personality is consistent individual differences in behavior across time and context. So the time thing is really important, and the repeatability thing is important too. So you have to test them twice to see if their behavior is repeatable. So it's been a lot of work and a lot of videos, because each video is 25 minutes long, basically. And then if I have over 200 snakes that I've tested times 2, that's 400. Times 25, so it's been a lot of work. But preliminary research that we're getting right now, we're looking at, number one is the exploratory behavior, and kind of seeing that urbanization seems to have a large impact on their exploratory behavior. So individuals that are coming from habitats that are like heavily urbanized, they seem to be more exploratory. And I'm working with the 6 species that we have in Southern California. So that's the Southern Pacific rattlesnake, the red diamond, the Mojave, the sidewinder, the western diamondback, and the speckled rattlesnake. But really the red diamond and the Southern Pacific, they're the 2 species that are in the most urbanized areas. Like people find them, in the neighborhoods, like on their properties very often. So there's definitely a greater trend with them being more exploratory. But we're kind of seeing that in the other species as well. We're also seeing that gravid females across the species seem to be less exploratory as they're larger. And then the non-gravid females and the males are more exploratory as they get bigger. But they're not like different from each other, the males and the non-gravid females. And then there was a slight trend of snakes that are from like higher elevations where there's more precipitation, more vegetation, and it's a little cooler. They were exploring slightly more like across the species. Okay, so then for the defensive behavior, that is also like super preliminary. I haven't analyzed everything yet, but similar results. The snakes that are from more urbanized areas seem to be slightly more defensive, which is kind of interesting. I personally didn't expect that. I thought maybe they would become less defensive as they're becoming like habituated to interacting with people, but they were striking more and rattling more just as a general trend. So that was kind of interesting. The gravid females were also consistently more defensive than the non-gravid females and the males, which was expected and kind of a cool result. So again, they were striking more and rattling more than the males and non-gravid females. The general idea is that yes, the habitats that these animals are coming from, it is influencing their personality traits. And yes, they do have personalities, but historically there hasn't been a lot of research that's been done on personality of snakes or crotalus. There's a number of people that are here at this conference that are talking about that. But now we're kind of like adding another piece of the puzzle saying, yes, we're getting more evidence that they have personality, looking at it across some species that it hasn't been examined yet, seeing that they do possess it, and then also seeing that, yes, where they come from is influencing their personality, because personality is a phenotype that can be selected for and against. And I think a lot of times people forget that behavior is a phenotype along with things like physical characteristics. So that's one project of my dissertation, but it's been a lot of work.
What makes rattlesnakes an interesting study in behavior? Like, what makes them unique among snakes?
I think for me personally, on my journey of like falling in love with herpetology in snakes, learning about crotalus, I really should say like Pitviper, social behavior has been what has made studying them so interesting for me. When I was like at my master's program and I was reading through the literature and I was learning that these animals can recognize who they're related to through scent, that they, will scent trail each other to find dens, and that, they have maternal attendants, they're really social at these denning sites. That was like a major turning point for me. And I mean, admittedly, I think because so many people don't like them and we have this misconception that they're not social, it's really cool to be able to study their social behavior and their behavior, because I don't know, I guess you just don't expect it because they're so cryptic in how they, just interact in the world. We don't really know a lot about them. And I think too, like being able to study their behavior in the lab is really cool, just because like sometimes when you observe them, you might say like, oh, I think they're kind of doing things that are different. But when you're actually able to like collect the data and analyze it statistically, like you're able to see things that are going on that you can't just see with the naked eye. And I think that makes it kind of exciting for me to do this kind of research. So I really love animal behavior, and again, it's just really cool to study it in a species that is typically considered to be kind of asocial and then also cryptically social.
So you mentioned your journey.
Yeah.
So how did you come to love herpetology and snakes?
My origin story is a bit different than a lot of the other people, a lot of the guys. I did not grow up catching reptiles out in nature. I honestly I can't recall seeing a wild snake probably until I was at my undergraduate and I was like 18. But I had this opportunity to do summer research, and I knew I wanted to work with animals. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And that summer, the only professor that was offering any research opportunities was, he's like a turtle biologist. And I was like, well, I don't know, but I'll do it because I want to do this research. Not that I was like crazy about turtles. So we were working at a bog. I grew up in Michigan, so I was at Alma College, and I was radio tracking snapping turtles in a bog 3 times a day for an entire summer, and that was really fun. But that was also like my first real exposure to interacting with snakes. So this bog, it's basically like a small lake surrounded by a sphagnum mat, surrounded by kind of a pine forest that's kind of in a swampy area. And there's like this dock that you had to walk out on to go like through the forest, through the sphagnum mat to the open water. And so as we would like walk by on this dock, there'd be these bushes of leather leaf, and there'd be like ribbon snakes and garter snakes like basking in these bushes. And I remember my undergrad advisor, Dr. John Rowe, he like grabbed one out of the bush and he was like, "Here, do you want to hold it?" And I was a little like, "Oh, I don't know. I've never really interacted with snakes before." And then I held it and I was like, "Okay, this is cool. I like this." And then we started like walking around the sphagnum mat, catching these garter snakes and these ribbon snakes, and we were pit tagging them and we were measuring them, and we really loved doing that. And so the second summer, I was like, I want to do radio telemetry on the water snakes, because they're also in the rodeo, you know, at the lake. And so I started doing radio telemetry on the water snakes, and I had a lot of like other opportunities to do research while I was there. It was a great undergraduate experience. I'm so thankful. I got to do radio telemetry on 2 different species of lava lizards, one on the main coast of Ecuador and then one in the Galapagos Islands. I got to go twice. I got to raise baby blandings turtles and look at how the color of the substrate that you raise them on will actually change their coloration over time. So I got to do a lot of really cool stuff, but I don't know, my heart, for some reason, it was really just drawn to the snakes. And so I knew I wanted to go get a master's degree. I wasn't fully sure what I wanted to do, but I knew like I wanted to do snakes. And so I found Dr. Brian Green at Missouri State University. And so I went there. And admittedly, I was drawn to Dr. Green because he had done water snake research, which is what I had done. And I don't know how I didn't know this, but when I got there, I was like, "Oh, you're doing like predominantly cottonmouth research." I had no idea. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to be working with venomous snakes. Like, they're dangerous. I don't really know that much about them. And I told him that, and he was like, "That's fine. You can study like parental care in mud snakes, because there's not that much that's been done on mud snakes." And I was like, "Awesome." And obviously mud snakes are gorgeous, and I was really excited about it. And so I was going to do that, and we were going to go collect them down at Mingo National Wildlife Refuge, which is like down in the boot heel of Missouri. But life kind of had other plans for me. And so the summer we were supposed to collect, it was like flooding, like 100-year level flooding, like towns getting washed away. And so by the time we got out there in the summer, when the water had cleared, it was too late in the season, and I got like 3 snakes. And obviously 3 is a horrible sample size, so I had to pivot because I didn't want to be in my master's program for a million years. And Dr. Green was like, "Well, why don't you just study the cottonmouths? Like, I have them in the lab. We can pivot and you can do this project." And I was like, "Okay, sure." So that was when I started reading about the Pitviper social behavior, and I don't know, that was like a really pivotal moment for me. It's like interesting how sometimes like things don't work out and there can be disappointments in your life, but they can like open the door for a new, better opportunity for yourself. So yeah, I started doing behavioral research with the cottonmouths, and I was studying their scent trailing behavior in regards to locating dens to overwinter. And then I also was looking at their avoidance of king snake chemical cues. So I was doing a lot of like chemoreception stuff in Y mazes. And it was a really good experience. And again, I kind of walked away from that like falling in love with pitvipers and realizing that I really wanted to study like snake behavior and snake social behavior, but just snake behavior in general. So when I wanted to go get a PhD, I knew what I wanted to do, but at the time I wasn't really aware of very many people that were doing it. And the only people I knew who were really studying snake behavior who had done that was Rulon Clark. He was the one that like first published like that pitvipers can recognize their kin. So I was all about possibly being in his lab. And then Dr. William Hayes. And when I was applying for my PhD, Rulon Clark's lab was full. So I pivoted to be at Loma Linda and worked with Dr. Hayes, and I'm really happy with my choice. I feel really like supported at Loma Linda, and Bill has been really great and kind of just letting me run with whatever I want to do. And I've had like such great opportunities out of that. I've got to meet so many people, like a lot of the rattlesnake removers in Southern California, and I don't know, I've just been really thankful, but that's kind of how I came to this point. It's been a long journey. My sort of claim to fame is the social buffering research that I have done. So social buffering is the concept of when you're with a companion and you're going through something stressful, your stress is going to be reduced as opposed to if you just were undergoing that alone. And this is something that has been really well studied in animals that are typically considered to be social. So birds, fish, mammals, primates, humans. There's a lot of research that's been done on it in humans. They've even found that like dogs can socially buffer humans. They've even reported it in termites, but no one had ever reported it in any reptile species, like, ever. And so the idea to look at social buffering in our rattlesnakes kind of came about from an observation that my advisor, Dr. Bill Hayes, had. So he used to go up the mountains to, look at the snakes at dens, do removals, and when he was coming back down the mountain with snakes in a bucket, he noticed that when there were multiple snakes in the bucket, they would rattle less than when they were just alone in the bucket. And we were with one of our colleagues, Dr. Brianna Putman, and we were like going up the mountain to show her this snake den. And he was talking to her about this, and she was like, oh, that's called social buffering. And we were like, okay. And then we dug into the literature, or I dug into the literature, didn't see, any papers on this. And we were like, okay, this is a really cool idea. So we basically brought some Southern Pacific rattlesnakes into captivity and attached heart rate monitors to them and then stressed them out, and found that when they were with a partner, like when you get startled, your heart rate elevates. Their heart rate would not elevate as much when they were with a partner as opposed to when they were alone. So that was really cool because, again, it had never been reported in reptiles at all, and it's just kind of adding another layer of like social complexity that they have. And we found that males and females, they all did it. So it was really interesting. And then like on a side note from that, we were also seeing some populational differences. So we saw that lowland, Southern Pacifics, so these are snakes that don't overwinter communally. They're in habitats that are, obviously lower elevation, hotter. They seem to be like more stressed or maybe exhibiting chronic stress. And then they also were just more defensive in general than our montane species who we know overwinter communally. So that was kind of interesting, and I think was a factor that led to this questioning of, does habitat influence personality? But yeah, since then, I've also attempted to look at how familiarity to the partner influences social buffering, but I've had kind of mixed results from that. It's really difficult when you're doing research that no one has done before, because you have to develop your own methods, and sometimes you choose the wrong thing and you make mistakes, and it sucks. So for my familiarity experiment, I tweaked too many things, I think, and so I put the snakes in a larger bin. So I wanted to see how they would interact with each other, because I was really interested to see if maybe they would choose to socialize more with familiar individuals, like by being in physical contact, and then maybe being more separated from individuals they didn't know. But that kind of added in a whole new factor of they're not touching. And in the bucket, in the first experiment, you put two snakes in a bucket, they're on top of each other. So there's a lot of physical contact happening. And in these experiments, they didn't have to touch each other, and I think usually they weren't. So that kind of complicated things. Another issue that I think I had with the second social buffering study is that I think the snakes were more stressed, which was causing greater elevations in their heart rate. And so I wasn't able to get a very low baseline heart rate. And the low baseline heart rate was really important for detecting social buffering. So, it makes sense, like your heart can only beat so fast. So if it's already beating kind of fast and then you're startled, like it doesn't go up very much. So it's kind of unfortunate. Changed too many things. I would like to redo this at some point and fix my mistakes. But something that was kind of interesting from having them be in this bigger tub, or we could look at like how they were associating with each other, is that, again, there were populational differences. So these lowland snakes, who we assume that they're not overwintering communally. It just doesn't get very cold, in the lowlands of Southern California. And so these snakes, they did not have a difference in how they associated with each other between like known and unknown individuals, but the montane snakes did. And what we saw is that the montane snakes associated more closely, like physically close, with unknown individuals versus known, which is really, I thought was really interesting. But I think it kind of makes sense because at these denning sites, we know that there's high site fidelity, right? So there's lots of individuals coming back to the same den year after year after year, and like family members coming to the same den. And so you kind of start to form a social network, and we're starting to get some more research in social networks. But it's the idea that like snakes have relationships with each other, and some are more social than others, and some choose to spend more time with specific individuals than others. So if you have like a new individual coming into a social network, you're probably gonna be like, who are you? I need to go check you out. And you might go spend more time like physically investigating them. So I think that result makes sense. So even though we didn't see social buffering in the second experiment, which kind of sucked, and thus far what we've seen is that when they were alone or with a known individual, they were less stressed than if they were interacting with an unknown individual, which is like not social buffering. But again, I don't think it means that they're not social buffering. I don't think my first experiment was a fluke by any means. I think it just means that it's more complex, and maybe physical contact is an important factor in social buffering. But there's a lot of questions to ask about social buffering, and it's been really cool to have done that experiment and then to see such like a positive reaction. And the journal that we published this in, they had a really good like PR team, and so they reached out to all of these different news medias, and so it kind of went out, and some people might have heard about it. It was in the news. We got interviewed a couple times, so that was really cool. I don't know if I'll ever do anything as impactful or as big as that. I mean, hopefully, but a little hard to live up to after all of that. But it was really cool just to know that like something that I've done is like directly impacting people's opinions and like changing their perceptions of rattlesnakes. So I'm really thankful to have had that opportunity.
Do you think that your social buffering work might have implications for like zoo management and how we keep snakes together?
Yeah, I think that it will. And that was something that I did want to look at. I did want to see how housing snakes together might impact their stress levels. I haven't had the funding to do it. And then I just thought, this is going to be a lot of work. And I decided to put all of my work into my personality research instead. But it is something I want to look at in the future. I think that there might be, implications, because I don't know, I think when it comes to housing and husbandry, I think sometimes people make a lot of assumptions. We assume that snakes are social and maybe they should be housed separately, but maybe they would benefit from being housed in groups. Maybe they can social buffer each other. Maybe they enjoy having a companion. We don't really know. So I think that we need to do research on this. I think there's also implications potentially for relocation. If you are transporting, like when you're relocating snakes, obviously when they're being captured and being held in captivity and moved, that can be really stressful for them. So there might be implications for if you're translocating a snake, having two individuals in a bucket and then releasing them. Maybe that increases their relocation success. I don't know. I think it's something that should be looked into as well. Again, it's like the social buffering research is just like the tip of the iceberg. I think it really has opened up the door for a lot of different research and a lot of different questions. And I do think it can be used in a beneficial way to help us better manage populations. Because too, maybe when you're releasing individuals, not just for translocation, but if you're releasing individuals to, that you captively reared and you want to try to release them into the wild to increase population numbers, maybe releasing them in groups maybe that would help. I don't know. Yeah, there's just a lot you have to learn still about this, so.
Snakes need to trauma bond.
Yeah, they need to trauma bond. They need buddies.
If you wanted to promote anything or say like how people can find you and follow your work, ResearchGate or anything like that?
Yeah, I am on ResearchGate. You can check out my publications on Google Scholar as well. A lot of my research is from my publications are from my undergraduate research, but I am hoping to get a lot of my current research out as soon as I graduate. I'm really hoping to graduate within the next year, and then hopefully move on to do a postdoc. But yeah, I don't really have anything to advertise.
Perfect. Well, thank you for doing this.
Of course.